We can all agree to the fact that reading is a necessary and important condition to becoming a better investor. This often starts with a business newspaper like the Economic Times, which then moves on to books, blogs, podcasts, newsletters, etc. Now, some information is good, but a lot of it is confusing, which makes the what, why, when, how, and how much of information one needs to consume a modern challenge. It's a question I have often grappled with, and so through this video, I shall take you through some techniques, some strategies, some tips by which you can organize yourself better and become an effective reader. So essentially, this video focuses on reading as an improvement skill, which in my opinion is more important than giving you a list of investing books, which I'll anyways not do in this video. Also, in the creation of this video, I have borrowed some techniques from other authors and creators, and the links to that are given in the description of this video. With that being said, let's begin. A common excuse for not reading more is the lack of time. But that argument doesn't go too far when we put into perspective that the world's richest individuals, people like Warren Buffett, Bill Gates, Elon Musk, etc., always find the time to do some reading. Now, in my opinion, reading is not about finding time. I think it is more about replacing time. For example, when you're out for a jog or perhaps when you're cooking, then that can be a wonderful time to listen to an audiobook. Or perhaps if you are taking the metro or a shuttle to the office, then an unproductive hour of scrolling through Instagram and Twitter can be effectively replaced with an hour of reading on your Kindle app. In fact, if you were to do a time audit and look through your entire day, you'll be surprised to find 3, 4, 5, even 6 slots where some reading time can be scheduled. And these time boxes need not be uniform. In fact, it's better if you mix it up a bit. For example, your commute reading slot can be a 30 or 45-minute one where you can probably read a book. But then you should also have these smaller 10 or 15-minute time slots, probably during tea time, where you can read a couple of newsletters. This might sound a little disjointed at first, but believe me, everything will add up, and before you know it, you would have manufactured a good 50 to 60 hours of reading time over a month. James Clear wrote this wonderful book titled Atomic Habits, in which he shared some techniques and systems that can help anyone imbibe good habits and also get rid of the bad ones. It so happens that some of these techniques can be easily applied into inculcating a reading habit as well. For instance, the book talks about the invisible hand that a person's environment plays in shaping one's behavior. For example, if you have a lot of fried snacks around the house, you're going to find it very difficult to lose weight in spite of whatever willpower that you claim to have. Similarly, having a couple of books on the bedside gives you a better chance of you reading that book rather than scrolling through your Facebook page when you retire to bed. If you've read Atomic Habits, you would have noticed a lot of talk about tiny habits. The trick here is to break a large task into small manageable chunks, and the same principle can be applied on a book reading technique that I personally find very useful. So let's say you want to read The Dhando Investor by Monish Pabrai. Now, this book, or the version that I have, is about 208 pages, and if I need to get through it within a week, then that comes to about 30 pages a day. So here's what you can do. Take 7 post-it notes, and on each note write the 7 days of the week. So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday and Sunday. Now the Monday note goes on page number 1, which denotes the start day of your reading week. Then on the 31st page, you stick Tuesday. On the 61st page comes the Wednesday post-it note, and so on and so forth. So effectively, you're giving your brain a target for every day, and by using these simple post-it notes, you not only have a mental target, but you also have a visual marker, which definitely ups the motivation. In fact, I use this very method when planning my reading list for the week, and believe me, it works every single time, irrespective of whether I'm reading a 500-page book or an annual report or trying to get through a stack of newsletters. So do try these couple of techniques to spruce up your reading habit, and if you have some techniques of your own, then do share it in the comments box below. Many people look at speed reading as the ultimate knowledge hack. And for what it's worth, this has definitely led to hundreds of videos on YouTube promising to teach this life-changing skill. But like anything in life, there are trade-offs. I mean, think of speed reading like watching a movie at a 2x speed. So while you might understand the larger plot, you would be missing out on some of the smaller details like the music, the suspense, and those subtle dialogues, etc. Speed reading is a bit like that. It can help you find information quickly, which is a necessary skill when studying for an exam. But if you are reading to learn something like investing, then I certainly wouldn't recommend it. Your focus when reading investment books should not be on getting through a book, but it should be about comprehending the text, being able to reflect on what you learned, and then being able to apply that knowledge to your investing model and to your view of the world. The one exception to this can be audiobooks or some YouTube videos, which is more about listening and can therefore be consumed at 1.25 or even 1.5x if the vocal speed is on the slower side. But as far as reading books, blogs, newsletters, or other material goes, it is highly suggested that one slows down to absorb the information and avoid using unnecessary hacks like speed reading. For a very long time, I was one of those people who felt the need to finish a book once I have started it. This meant reading each and every page under the assumption that there is something important, some golden words that I'm going to find in those later pages. But according to Naval Ravikant, and if you haven't heard of Naval, then I strongly suggest you read up his almanac that's available free of cost on his website. So according to Naval, we should not look at books like contracts and we should aim to have an enjoyable experience through them. And if you aren't enjoying the material, then one should quit reading further and move on to a more likable book. In fact, Alec Wykovsky of the Twitter channel Alex and Books uses two simple yet effective techniques. The first one is a simple 10% rule. So let's say a book is 200 pages and therefore 10% comes to 20 pages. What the rule says is that within the first 20 pages of reading that investing book, you would have got a taste of what is going to be covered, the writing style, etc. And only if you like what you read should you continue with it, otherwise you should stop reading further. A second technique that Alex proposes and he himself follows is the 3 strikes rule. How this works is you read the introduction and the first chapter of the book, and if you are still not in love with that book, then that's 2 strikes. Then you skip over to the table of contents and see if there is a later chapter in the book that you might find interesting. Once you have identified that chapter, you start reading this random chapter, and if you don't like this one as well, then that's strike 3, which means it's time to quit reading that book. This approach gives the author enough opportunities to impress you, and if you aren't impressed, then you can save a lot of time by not persistently reading it further. Actually, in my opinion, if the first 2 chapters in a book are not connecting with you, then there is a high probability that you will not like that book, because most authors and especially non-fiction writers spend most of their time in the beginning of the book, and once they have shared their main idea, they start running out of ideas and simply resort to giving more examples. So if you're like me and you don't need dozens of examples, then just understand the core theme or the main point of the book and feel free to move on to something more interesting. We read books, especially investment books, plus we read blogs, newsletters, financial statements, etc. to be able to apply that knowledge into our own investing strategies and practices. If my memory serves me right, it was Naval, or maybe it was Ryan Holiday. Well, it was one of these guys who said in a podcast that books are by far the best investment you can make, because for less than $10, they could potentially change your life. Okay, so you've read a book and you've loved it, and now the question is, what are some actions that you can take after reading that book? The first technique one can explore is to create a summary page. This summary page should include the book's primary idea, your top 5 takeaways, a couple of top quotes, and most importantly, what actions are you going to take to improve your life or your own investing methods. In fact, if you want to add an extra layer of commitment, then explore creating that summary and pasting it on a social media platform. For example, here's a simple thing that Parimal does on his Twitter account. He reads and understands a trending topic and then goes on to write a one-page summary using his pen and paper and then shares that image with the entire world via Twitter. So that's a strong show of commitment and something that you too can explore. Yet another technique one can employ is to write notes or highlight passages. Now, most people, me included, tend to overdo this part by virtually coloring the book by highlighting too many passages. Instead, what's recommended is a filtration process wherein you force yourself to restrict your takeaways from a book to only the top 10 points that you can conveniently write on the front or the back page of the book. For example, say you come across some marketing case study about Steve Jobs that you really liked. In that case, you'll switch to the first page of the book, which is generally a blank page, and write Steve Jobs plus creative marketing, page 54 or whatever page it is. This way you can have a ready reckoner of the 10 most important takeaways of that book in the form of your own customized table of content, which can be very useful if you want to refer back to the book at a later date, or if you want to use it to create a blog, an Insta post, a Twitter feed, etc. A search on Amazon.com is the most common way of identifying which books to read. There are reviews, price, book covers, author bios, sample chapters, etc., which do a fantastic job of influencing what we read and what we don't read. Now, to that effect, Alex from Alex and Books gives a wonderful tip wherein he says that when you look at reviews, try to ignore the 5-star reviews, which invariably comes from your superfans, friends and family members, and likewise also ignore the 1 stars, which are more around damaged books, late delivery and similar issues. So essentially, Alex puts a higher weight on the 2, 3 and 4 stars, as these are the people who have put in some thought into writing the review. A second selection technique you can use is to read up on what others are reading. And generally, the best source for procuring that list is from podcasts or Twitter feeds. For example, here are some books that Monish Pabrai has tagged on his Twitter account, and believe me, that's a great place to start. In fact, I really like the strategy because this way you'll get introduced to some excellent but not so famous books that are generally omitted from bestseller lists. A not so obvious advantage of this approach is that you don't end up reading the same stuff that everyone else is reading, which, if you remember from our video on contrarian investing, can be quite a profitable endeavor for you. And the final tip I have for you is to not shy away from the thinner books. What I mean is that there is a tendency amongst most people to not read short articles or books which are, say, 70 to 90 pages in length. Maybe the thought process is that a small book will not offer much knowledge, but in my opinion, a small book is actually better because it gives concise and more actionable information without the author rambling or beating around the bush. So be thankful if your investing book is a short one, because I have a feeling that's the material where you'll find a lot of value in. And with this, we come to the end of this video. As you've seen, this video was essentially a reminder of a skill that we learned in primary school, and reading is something a lot of people, including me, have forgotten over the years. In these last 20 months since I started making these YouTube videos, I have tried to revive some of these practices, and I sincerely hope you found some of the tips, suggestions and strategies we discussed in this video useful. Once again, thank you for your time. Do like this video, subscribe to our channel, and I look forward to catching up with you next week. Until then.
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.